In the year 47 BCE, Alexandria was a city of wonders. Its harbor glinted under the Mediterranean sun. Its streets hummed with merchants trading papyrus, spices, and precious manuscripts from all corners of the Hellenistic world. Towering above it all was the great royal library home to scrolls untold, a treasure trove of human knowledge. Callista, a young scribe from Athens, stepped off a merchant vessel, her heart pounding with equal parts excitement and trepidation. She carried with her a satchel of blank papyrus, quills in a carved box, and a modest supply of ink. Her parents had been modest scholars, and they had scraped together funds so she could travel to Alexandria to study under the great librarians and copy the ancient works she had only read of in Athens. As she made her way through crowded alleys lined with market stalls, she saw statues of Ptolemy rulers, temples to Serapis, and scholars in cloaks debating heatedly in under-arcades. She felt as if she had stepped into a grand, living tapestry. When she arrived at the gate of the library quarter, she was met by an elderly guard whose eyes, sharp and kind, studied her closely. "You seek the library?" he asked in Greek, his voice low. "Yes, sir," Callista replied, bowing slightly. "I come to study, to copy, and to learn." The guard gestured, and behind him, a corridor of limestone buildings opened into the library complex, reading rooms, lecture halls, papyrus workshops, and living quarters for scribes and scholars. The air was cool and quiet, filled with the soft rustle of scrolls and the distant murmur of voices discussing Platonic geometry, Egyptian medicine, or the latest treatise on astronomy. Callista's guide was Demetrios, a kindly middle-aged scribe who had worked at the library for decades. His robes were dust-stained, his fingers stained with ink, but his eyes shone when he spoke of the scrolls. "This is a place," he said, his voice heavy with reverence, "where knowledge from all over the world converges. Egyptian hieroglyphs, Aryan hymns, Babylonian star charts, Persian poetry, all here, collected, copied, studied." Callista nodded, her breath catching. She felt she had arrived somewhere sacred. In her first month, Callista was assigned to the copying hall. There, she sat in a narrow wooden cell lined with small stone shelves. Each shelf held rolls of papyrus, some blank, some filled with ivory-white specimens of philosophy, history, science. Her task was to copy in her cleanest Greek hand a treatise on geometry by Euclid, and later, some parts of Aristarchus on the size of the sun. Often she was joined by other scribes, men and women from Syria, from Egypt, from Carthage. They worked in silence, save for the occasional turn of papyrus and the soft scratching of reed pens dipped in ink. Demetrios came to teach her how to unroll the scrolls gently, how to flatten them on a wooden board, how to guard them from moisture and mites. He showed her how mistakes were corrected, a small cross in the margin, a clean note, sometimes a sewn patch of papyrus. The library's preservation methods were remarkable. This was not simply a place for collecting scrolls, it was a place for careful guardianship. By night, Callista joined lectures in the lecture hall, a domed chamber open to the sky. There, under the vault of stars, she listened to the great astronomer Eratosthenes explain how he had measured the circumference of the earth using shadows in Syene and Alexandria. She heard poets read their verses and philosophers debate ethics. Once, the mathematician Apollonius described conic sections, the way a cone sliced by a plane produced ellipses, parabolas, hyperbolas. Callista was in her element. As she grew into her role, Callista befriended Theon, a young librarian from Rhodes. Theon's specialty was geometry, and he was perpetually restless, always sketching diagrams on papyrus and arguing about the curvature of circles with anyone who would listen. One evening, as the orange light of sunset filtered through tall columns, Theon led her to a restricted chamber, a smaller room deep in the heart of the library where the most precious scrolls were kept. "Here," he whispered, "are texts few have seen, works by Archimedes, lost plays of Aeschylus, Egyptian theological treatises, even letters from the Persian court." Callista gasped as she gazed across tier upon tier of wooden shelves loaded with scrolls. The air here smelled faintly of papyrus and sandalwood, preserved by the wax seals and careful climate control. Theon took down one roll, unrolled it gently, and showed her a diagram, geometrical shapes inscribed in circles, spirals, and parabolas. "This is Archimedes' work on spirals," he said. "One day I hope to use it to design machines." Callista, deeply moved, reached out. "And do you think it's safe?" she said. "With all these scrolls?" Theon nodded solemnly. "We guard them well. But winds of fortune ... change." Callista felt a chill. The library, she realized, while safe in this moment, was not immutable. Over the following months, talk began to swirl in Alexandria. Julius Caesar was in Egypt. There were rumors of war. The city, already steeped in culture, now felt under a darkening cloud. One day, as Callista and Theon were copying in the hall, Demetrios entered, his face grave. "Imperial troops," he said, voice low. "Caesar's men. They have come to Alexandria." Callista felt her stomach drop. "Are they coming for the library?" Demetrios sighed. "No one is certain. But we must be careful. Some soldiers show curiosity, others less so. They do not understand this place. To them it may simply be riches to be taken." That night the library seemed less peaceful. The students and scribes spoke in hushed tones. Some fled to their homelands. Others, like Callista, stayed, determined to guard the scrolls with their lives. The inevitable happened. In the summer heat, a skirmish in the harbor turned violent. Ships burned. The air filled with smoke and ash. Callista was working in the copying hall when she smelled it, a faint, acrid tang, then growing stronger. She slipped outside to see plumes of black smoke rising from the docks. The flames danced against the sky, licking at wooden structures, reaching for the wind. Panic spread among the people. Soldiers shouted. Citizens ran. Demetrios burst into the hall. "Shut the doors! Protect the scrolls!" Callista and the other scribes scrambled. They unrolled fragile manuscripts, withdrew precious volumes from the shelves, and carried them to safer rooms, ones deeper in the library's complex, ones constructed from thick limestone. But the fire was relentless. A wind shifted. The smoke came rolling through the halls. They could hear wood crackling, splintering, then crashing as beams gave way. Callista's heart pounded. She clutched a roll of Aristarchus's measurements. Beside her, Theon held Archimedes. They laid them gently on marble tables as the walls trembled. Suddenly a crash. A balcony above their room collapsed. Plaster and dust rained down. Screams echoed through the building. Callista stumbled, her ink splattering, her heart racing. Demetrios shouted, "This way! Follow me!" They raced through shadowed corridors, past shelves of scrolls, with flames licking at the doorways. The smoke was suffocating, the heat intense. Callista coughed, her vision blurring. Outside, the world was chaos. The sky glowed red. Soldiers fought, citizens fled, ships burned. The sea itself seemed to catch fire under the glare. In that moment, Callista realized they might lose everything. Demetrios, Theon, and Callista rallied a handful of scribes and scholars who remained. Among them was Hypatia's uncle Well, not Hypatia yet, but her elder relative, a quiet philosopher named Serapion, who believed deeply in preserving knowledge. "We must save what we can," he said, voice steady. "We cannot defend the entire library, but we might save a few key roles." They formed a small group. Their plan was daring: carry precious scrolls out of the main building to a nearby warehouse at the harbor's edge, one less likely to be touched by fire. Some ships still lay docked. If they could load scrolls aboard, perhaps they could sail them away, hidden under cargo. Callista volunteered to guide them, having memorized much of the layout of the library. Theon and others carried heavy chests, packed with philosophical, mathematical, and literary texts. Demetrios oversaw. They snuck through back passages, secret stairways closed for decades, dusty corridors seldom used, and emerged at a quiet courtyard near the northern wall. It rattled under cannon fire, or perhaps heavy artillery. Callista couldn't be certain. The ground trembled. With each chest of scrolls, they made their way to wooden skiffs moored at the harbor. The danger was immense. Soldiers patrolled, firebrand embers floated across the night air, and wind was unpredictable, but they persevered. With trembling hands, they loaded the chests onto small boats one by one, covering them with sacks of grain and wool to mask their cargo. Callista stayed behind as the final chest left. She turned to Demetrios. "Will there be more?" she asked, voice trembling. He nodded. If we can salvage more tomorrow, but for tonight. We pray. The boat carrying their precious cargo drifted into the black water, slipping away into the moonlit harbor. Callista watched until the silhouette of the vessel was swallowed by shadows. When Callista finally returned to the library complex, the sight that greeted her heart was broken. One wing was reduced to smoldering ruins. Walls blackened by soot, columns toppled, and halls strewn with burnt fragments of papyrus, charred beyond repair. She walked through what remained, stepping over collapsed beams, over scorched melted wax seals, over ashes that once had been priceless scrolls. Her throat tightened with grief. In the courtyard she found Theon and Serapion surveying the damage. Theon's eyes were red, streaked with soot and salt. He had a charred roll in his hand, just a fragment. The rest was ash. "The Archimedes text," he whispered. "It's gone." Serapion gently clasped his shoulder. "Something survived, Theon? Some we saved tonight?" Callista joined them, clutching her own satchel. "I thought maybe I could copy more tomorrow." Demetrios approached, older now, his face lined but resolute. "We did what we could. We saved a number of scrolls." "But not all." They stood in silence for a long while, the air heavy with loss and smoke. In the days that followed, Alexandria was a city in crisis. The fires spread at times, then were doused. Ship captains debated leaving, scholars begged for protection. Callista, Theon, Demetrios, and Serapion made repeated journeys to the warehouse by the harbor. They catalogued the scrolls they had saved, rolled them carefully in linen wrappings, and organized them into chests to be shipped on friendly merchant vessels that still risked the sea. Yet the danger was not over. Some soldiers boarded their warehouse, demanding to inspect cargo. Callista had to hide scrolls under sacks of wheat. Theon pretended they carried only mundane goods. Their hearts pounded as crates were opened, as soldiers peered inside. Once, a soldier reached in, his hand brushing a linen parcel. Theon stifled a gasp. "Just grain," he said, voice calm. The soldier nodded, closed the crate, and moved on. Callista realized then that preservation was not just a scholarly pursuit, it was an act of rebellion, of faith, of defiance. Over the next few months, the group found sympathetic captains willing to smuggle the chests away. One ship, bound for Rome, agreed to take several chests labeled as philosophical treatises for private scholars. Another, bound for Antioch, offered to carry them in exchange for fair pay. Callista helped prepare inventories in Greek, listing titles, authors, and subject matter, but careful not to draw attention to the most sensitive texts. They included geometry, astronomy, medicine, theology, drama. Each chest was sealed, marked, and labeled to blend in. When the ships departed, Callista stood on the wooden dock, watching the silhouettes fade. The sea wind tossed her hair, and she blinked back tears. She thought of the scrolls she would never see again. But she also thought of hope that some small portion of Alexandria's wisdom would survive, carried into distant ports where scholars might treasure them. Months passed. The fires ceased, the gunfire died away. The city slowly rebuilt, but the library was changed forever. Many of its halls lay in ruin, many scrolls lost without trace. Surviving scribes rebuilt shelves, cleaned up ash, and tried to restore order. But the Golden Age felt bruised, fragile, diminished. Callista resumed her work in the copying hall, though now with heavy sadness. She copied what remained, taught newcomers how to handle scrolls, trained apprentices, and lectured to students in the less damaged lecture halls. Theon, scarred by grief, continued his geometric studies. He made new diagrams, but he was quieter, more thoughtful, as though each circle he drew held memory of what was lost. Serapion rebuilt his little reading room in a corner of the library. He hosted discussions again, ethics, the nature of knowledge, the responsibility of scholars. He spoke often of duty to preserve, but also to share, so that knowledge would not again be hoarded and destroyed. Years later, Callista, now older, with streaks of gray in her dark hair, sat on a small ship's deck, staring at the horizon. She had been invited to Rhodes and Athens to teach scribing and library science. She carried with her a few precious rolls, parts of Eratosthenes' geography, fragments of Archimedes, copies of Plato, and treatises by little-known Egyptian thinkers. She watched the sun set in gold, reflecting on the journey that had begun so many years ago in the great halls of Alexandria. A young student sat beside her, holding one of the rolls, unrolling it gently. "Teacher," he said, "is this safe?" Callista smiled, her eyes reflecting both sadness and determination. "As safe as we can make it," she replied. "We saved what we could, and now we must carry it forward." He nodded, reverent. He studied the scroll, ran his fingers over the inked letters. "These words," he murmured, "they connect me to something greater than myself." Callista placed her hand on his shoulder. "That is the purpose of knowledge," she said softly. "To connect us not only to our own time, but to the past, and to the future." In her final years, Callista lived in a small house in Rhodes, surrounded by her students. She taught them how to copy carefully, how to restore worn papyrus, how to catalog with precision. She spoke often of Alexandria the Grand Library, the lectures under the stars, the fire, the escape. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, she closed her eyes and heard the whisper of scrolls, the gentle rustle of papyrus, the soft voices of scholars discussing Euclid, Archimedes, and poets she once knew only by name. She imagined the great halls, the shelves, the distant lecture rooms, and the friends she'd lost. Yet she took comfort in the knowledge that a part of that library lived on in ships, in other cities, in the minds of her students. One evening, she summoned Theon, now a mature geometer. Serapion's daughter, Serapion had passed some years before, to her small study. By candlelight she unrolled a delicate scroll. It was a copy she had made years earlier of a treatise by a poet whose name had been almost forgotten. "This is for you," she told them, voice trembling. "Take it, guard it, teach it. Let the words live." They accepted, tears in their eyes. Theon, gentle but firm, nodded. "We will." And so, in the soft glow of the lamp, the three of them, teacher and students, survivor and keeper, held the scroll between them as if cradling a fragile, living thing. Centuries have passed since Callista's time. The great library of Alexandria, in its original magnificence, is no more. We no longer have most of the works that once filled its shelves. Many were lost to fire, neglect, war. Yet in small pockets across the ancient world, and perhaps in modern, libraries inspired by its spirit, snippets of that knowledge survive. Fragments of Archimedes, bits of Euclid, texts by mathematicians, poets, philosophers, and scientists. Some survive in translation, others in commentaries, others simply as echoes in later works. The whispering scrolls live on, and the legacy of people like Callista, Theon, Domitian, and Serapion, the humble scribes and scholars who risked everything to preserve human thought, remains a testament to the power of knowledge, the courage of caretakers, and the enduring hope that wisdom, once found, must not be lost. Years had passed since the night the library burned. The smoke had long vanished from Alexandria's skies, but for Callista it had never truly left her heart. She had spent her remaining years far from Egypt, teaching in Rhodes, copying what little she had saved, whispering the stories of what once was to her small circle of students. Now the air was soft and gold with evening light. The room was quiet, filled with the scent of ink and olive oil lamps. Callista sat by the window, her hands frail but steady, a scroll resting across her lap, the same she had carried out of the fire decades ago. Theon was there, older now, his once restless energy softened into patience. He watched her carefully as she unrolled the papyrus, the letters faded but still alive. "So many of them lost," he murmured. Callista smiled faintly. "And yet, look how many still live. You, and your students, the words they've learned. Every time a new mind reads them, the library breathes again. Outside, waves murmured against the shore. Her students sat nearby, silent, reverent, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts of Alexandria that seemed to fill the room. Callista dipped her quill one final time and added a small note to the margin of the scroll, not a correction, not a title, just a simple line. "Copied in memory of the fire, that knowledge may never burn again." She handed the scroll to her youngest student, a boy of 16 with ink-stained fingers and wonder in his eyes. "Take this," she said softly. "Guard it. Teach others. Someday no one will remember my name, but they will read these words. That is enough." The boy bowed his head, clutching the scroll as though it were a living thing. I will, teacher, she smiled, closing her eyes. In her mind she saw the library once more, the marble columns rising toward a sky of gold, the soft light filtering through papyrus shelves, the murmur of scholars debating, the laughter of students, the voice of Demetrios echoing in distant halls, and she felt peace. Theon sat beside her until the candle burned low. When he finally looked up, she had fallen still, her face calm, her hands resting gently in her lap. He rose quietly, covering the scrolls with linen, and looked out toward the sea. The horizon shimmered, and for a moment he could almost imagine the reflection of the old library's columns rising from the waves, faint, ghost-like, eternal. Centuries later, in the cool dust of a forgotten storeroom beneath the city of Rhodes, a scholar would uncover a sealed chest, its contents fragile but miraculously preserved. Inside were scrolls written in clean Greek script, each bearing the same note in the margin, copied in memory of the fire. Among them, one fragment bore a name, written faintly in the corner, Callista of Alexandria. The scholar paused, fingers trembling. The ink was faint, the papyrus brittle, but as he unrolled it, the letters caught the light. They spoke not of conquest, nor kings, nor war, but of stars, geometry, poetry, and the unending pursuit of truth. And in that quiet chamber, after 2,000 years, Alexandria lived again, not as marble and flame, but as memory carried in ink, in hearts and hands willing to learn, for knowledge once kindled never truly dies. It becomes the fire itself, passed from one age to another, burning not to destroy, but to illuminate. And somewhere, in the hush between turning pages, you can still hear it, the faint, eternal whisper of the forgotten libraries of Alexandria.